All right, welcome to episode 7 of the Fast, Easy Success Marketing Insider podcast.
The Fast, Easy Success Marketing Insider. The uncut, uncensored podcast. Bringing you the refreshing, no fluff, no BS views in business, sales, and marketing you desire. Your host, author, marketing strategist, direct response copywriter, and serial entrepreneur, Eric Barton, the results specialist. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Fast, Easy Success Marketing Insider. A lot of exciting things coming today and in the future for you. And make sure you hit that subscription button right now so you don't miss out on the future value-packed podcasts coming your way. And before we dive into our show today and our very special guest, I just want to welcome everybody to head over to FastEasySuccess.com. Go ahead and grab your business building tips sent directly to your email daily. And also when you head over there, I'm going to give you your free business cheat sheets. These are going to help you with your websites, emails, and writing. And let's just dive in here because I'm excited to have our guest on. A special guest is joining you on our show today, and definitely thought jamming with this man today would bring some great value to you. If you haven't discovered this man yet, you're definitely in for a treat today. He's a marketing strategist, a direct response copywriter, who has not only created success for tons of clients online and offline, over the past decade has built several of his own businesses literally from scratch. Amongst also have worked with some of the legends in marketing and copywriting, such as Gary Halbert, Joe Vitale, Yanik Silver, David Garfinkel, Michael Fortin, and more. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us today, I want to welcome to the show John Anghelache. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing good, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for taking the time to jam with us today. And I'm definitely excited to have you here. Now, John, real quick for the people not familiar with you, can you tell people maybe how you got the bug or started out really in the copywriting world?
Well, as far as business is concerned, I started out, this is going to sound very crazy, but it's true. I saw an infomercial.
Okay.
And after watching that infomercial, I was about 21, I think, at the time. I bought the package and realized that there was nothing within this product I wanted to do, but there was one point that was made, which was there's a number of different products and services that in our society people are going to need all the time. One of them is houses.
Okay.
So I put two and two together and decided, hey, you know what? If that's the case, I should go and start selling houses.
Right.
Now, I had no background in business whatsoever. In fact, I was going to school at the time. My intention was to become an athletic trainer, and
really?
that didn't go too far because I needed money, and so school was just not going to cut it for me. And I realized when I got into the business world, which I just basically put myself out there, was that it appealed to me a lot more. So I ended up getting into real estate. And first 6 months, I had one sale, which was really bad. Not going to work out if you want food. So
right.
I decided I got to learn how to actually sell real estate because getting your license just wasn't enough. And I came across a couple of different concepts. Obviously, knowing how to sell, but then I realized that even if I knew how to sell, it wouldn't do me any good if I didn't have anybody in front of me to actually sell to. And so I realized marketing was really the key to making that business work, and it really is. So
right.
I ran across a guy named Craig Proctor, who at the time was the #1 RE/MAX agent in the world. This guy was selling like 400 houses a year. Like a house or two a day. It was insane.
Right.
And he was using direct response marketing. So actually he had gotten there through grunt work, cold calling, that kind of stuff, but he started using direct response marketing to make everything a lot easier, and then he exponentially grew his business. So I started following him, and that's how I ran across guys like Dan Kennedy, Jay Abraham, and Gary Halbert, and so forth.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I started selling houses, and it got to the point where we were getting 300, 400, 500 calls a month from the lead generation stuff that we were doing. It
nice.
We actually got to the point where we couldn't actually handle
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, it is to some extent. Because the only problem is there was some waste and all that, but it didn't matter. The point is by using the right marketing concepts and principles and strategies, we ended up doing really well, and then I transitioned into investing into mortgages, and then from there I had built several successful marketing programs, and realized that I liked working with businesses to help them to market their products and services, and that's how I transitioned over to writing copy for clients and putting together their marketing plans.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and that's you obviously got the in the trenches experience there too with the did you ever continue with the real estate, or did you kind of just drop and move on to working with clients after that, or?
Well, I did some real estate investing, and then I pretty much just dropped all of that. I think you can only have so many irons in the fire, and um, as you well know, writing direct response copy is very time intensive. I mean, it takes a lot
Right.
of effort to do it properly. So I just decided to stick with this.
Nice, nice. That's great. And what I've been doing, I guess, and actually can go perfectly what we were talking about in the real estate game too, when you were working in the office for lead generation. And I've been kind of asking guests in the beginning their thoughts or really their style, because I think that's one of the really the unsexy sales secrets in business is the lead generation. And once you get that right, that can really make your life and business a lot easier. So I was
Yeah,
wondering,
well, it kind of depends what kind of business you're in. Obviously, if you're a retail place,
right,
definitely do lead generation if you want to, but you're obviously depending upon the location of that mall
right,
or whatever outlet you're into to get traffic. But if you're in a business where you have to have leads, um, my take on it is first of all, you have to understand your prospect and what it is that will entice them to want to talk to you in the first place. In this first conversation, I want to liken it to when somebody is trying to entice somebody to go on a date with them. You're not going to talk about marriage during the first date. Let's say that's your intention, though. You want to
right.
eventually get married. You're not going to talk about that on your first date. So I think you have to think about that in the same way with your business. Let's say that you sell insurance or real estate or cars. That first contact isn't necessarily about your product. And it's a huge mistake in most cases to make that first contact about your product, because the person may not be there yet mentally and emotionally to where they're going to make the buying decision.
That's a great point. Not
So,
everybody's in the same part or same basically motivation.
yeah, right. I mean, unless you can read their minds, you don't know where they're at in the buying process. So the assumption should be that they are in the information collecting part of the process. And that's usually the way people buy stuff, especially expensive things, but in general, just about anything, is first they want to get some information about it.
Right.
They want to know something about that product. Let's take real estate, since I know a little bit about that still, and that is, the first thing that somebody wants to do before they sell a house is they're kind of interested in what their house would sell for,
Right.
before they decide to list it. Somebody who wants to buy a house, the first thing that, or one of the first things they're interested in is knowing, what houses are available, what price ranges can they buy in. All of this stuff is information gathered. They go through a certain spell of time to gather that info before they determine what they're going to do. So the first thing you need to do is kind of think about, in my opinion anyway, what are the issues that these people want information on. I'll give you another point.
Okay.
I'm in the process of putting together a lead generation campaign for my email marketing and copywriting services,
Okay.
just email specifically. So now there's a number of ways I can approach people. I can approach them and just say, hey, we got the best email marketing services on the planet. Here's the price. That's not going to work for too many people.
Right.
Most of them are going to want to know a little bit of information regarding this and what we offer, but not even what we offer. What everybody's thinking about at first is their problems, what problems they're having. So, for instance, people looking to buy a house, what problems do they have? Well, where do they find prices in their houses in their price range? What can they afford? Um, you know, what's a home inspection all about? Right? Those are all issues. Those are all problems. And they're
Right.
thinking about those prior to making the final decision on writing a contract on a house. So if we use that logic, what I was thinking about as far as the people I'm going to contact with my lead generation campaign is, what are email marketers wondering about? What problems are they facing right now that I can give them some information on, which number one, gives them answers, number two, positions me as a source of valuable information,
Right.
and then number three, it sets up that first conversation. So in this particular example, what I'm going to do is I'm coming up with a report, and the report is going to be entitled 5 Dangers Facing Email Marketers Today.
Okay.
And there are some real issues going on that that they need to know about. So the report is going to talk about those issues, and then that'll be about 2/3 of the report to 3/4 of it. And then the last portion of it, last couple of pages or so, I'm going to offer a free consultation where we can sit down and discuss their particular issues. And I'm going to give them some extra stuff that they can do right away, that they can implement right away in their business, whether they hire me or not.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
if you think about it that way, if you're in insurance, I don't know what kind of insurance somebody would be selling. Let's say it's, whole life or something. You got to think about, like, why would somebody want to buy whole life insurance? What issues would they be facing? And then engage them there at that point, because that's what's going on. That's the conversation going on in their minds. And that'll lead to the first conversation about whether or not your company, your product, and you are going to be who they're going to go for.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of saying, because most people would come at it as, I wanna sell this house, or I wanna, like you're saying, sell an email program. But doing it the way you're talking about, stepping back, seeing what their real questions are in the information gathering process before they buy, and like you said, you're giving them value whether they use your services or not. I think it's definitely, like you're saying, it's positioning you definitely better than the person that's just trying to shove something down someone's throat, no matter what stage they're at.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue here is people hearing this will say, well, that's work. I have to
Right.
find out what
Right.
problems they're facing with this. Yeah, well, it is work, right? Because that's just how it is. You've got to go with the psychology of how people think and how they make decisions. And people just, they don't see an ad that says, I sell insurance, we got the best rates, call me to buy something, and then they pick up the phone and call. It's not typically that's not how they're going to make that decision.
Right.
Um, Now, some of them will if they are at that point already. And so my point is you've got to start at the beginning to get them to that point.
All right.
That's the process. Now, a couple other quick things about this. And this is kind of important. What I'm also going to do as far as this email marketing campaign is concerned is I'm going to determine who my ideal customer is,
Okay.
or my ideal client. This is another very important point. So who would want to know about the issues facing email marketers? Who would benefit most from that info, number one? But number two, who would be in a position to hire me once they see that I'm someone that can provide them with the solutions that they need? And ultimately, the solutions that they need have to do with getting more sales, more customers, more profit. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Right.
So one of the things that I think you need to do to lead generate properly is you need to sit down and make a composite, a profile of who your ideal customer is. And then find a list of that ideal customer as closely as possible to it.
Right.
Because otherwise you're putting your message out there to people who might not be in any kind of a position to purchase what you have to sell, whether they're ready now or they're going to be ready, in the future, and you follow up with them. So that's another really important part of the lead generation process, is determining who is your ideal client or customer, and then finding out where you can get the list of them, or where you can put your message where those people people are going to see it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like you said, some people might say it's work, but that work in the beginning is going to pay off dramatically in the end, so or throughout the process. So
I'll tell you how I started my copyright business.
okay,
I did not have an internet connection. In fact, I didn't have a computer at the time. So,
okay,
like a little over 10 years ago, I didn't even have a computer
all right,
that I was using. But I had two campaigns. One brought in over $25 million, the other one over $14 million. So I knew that I could write copy and I could structure these campaigns
right,
to do well. So what I did was I made a list of, I think it was 20 of the top marketers that I had found through researching online at the public library.
okay,
So guys like Gary Halbert and Yanik Silver, those people.
right,
And I made a list of them, and I wrote a very simple, direct email. Now, this isn't really lead generation per se, but it kind of is. This is sort of a soft version of it.
all right,
The email basically said this. It said, look, I have no idea if you hire copywriters or if you ever give copywriters work, but if you do, I'm available. I've got samples. Let me know.
nice, direct
Like
to the point.
5 or 6 or 7 contacted me and said, send us your samples.
Nice,
So I sent out samples, and 3 of them hired me.
nice,
Now, that's another way to lead generate, because it's a little bit different. Basically, the bait piece, in this particular case, were my samples.
right,
Okay? So it's not exactly the same process as what I'm talking about here, but I was solving a problem for them, and that is, if they needed a copywriter, I could be potentially a source for them to give work to kind of unload some of their projects to. And that email resulted in, I mean, I call it my $100,000 email because that email generated, I mean, well over $100,000 now, but it generated $100,000 pretty quickly in client work.
nice, and it was straight, direct to the point.
Yeah, it was straight, it was direct to the point, but the reason it worked is because I made a list of who my ideal clients, potential clients would be,
Right,
and then I found those people that closely matched that profile, and then I sent them an offer that was a soft, it wasn't hire me now, I'm the best, blah, blah, and all that stuff. It was, if you do give work to other copywriters, I might be somebody you should consider, and I've got samples so you can make a determination. That was
nice,
another kind of soft sell lead generation process, but it started with getting my ideal clients down pat. What I'm going to do with the email marketers is I'm going to get a list of about 500 companies that have certain criteria that I've determined would indicate that they would have an interest in hiring a copywriter, or preferably they already do hire. Actually, that's one of my criteria. They already do hire copywriters,
right,
the marketing consultants, and they do have a big email list and all the rest of that stuff that goes with it. And then I'm going to send them this lead generation report. But here's a little bit of a twist to it.
okay,
The way that I'm going to do this is a strategy that I've used before, and it works really well. And I actually learned it from a gentleman named Chet Holmes.
yeah,
And Chet was one of the top salespeople in the world. Before he passed away, I think a year ago.
right,
And he had a very specific process where he would mail a lead generation letter offering a free presentation or report, and he would mail this letter, or actually variations of it. He'd have maybe about 7 to 10 different variations of it. Every 2 weeks, he would mail it and then follow up with a call. And then whoever either told him we're not interested, or whoever was interested, he'd take them off the list so that they wouldn't get, the next piece in a follow-up series.
right,
And 2 weeks later, he'd mail a different version of the lead generation letter, and then he'd follow up with a call. And he did this religiously. And he was able to have tremendous success with this process. But again, it's very intense. It depends upon you having the right list and then having the right offer for your lead generation piece. and then having the consistency of sending out the letters and following up with the calls, sending out the letters, following up with the calls. That process right there is fairly foolproof.
Yeah, I mean that is. I'm actually doing something similar with a niche I'm diving into. I told myself this year I'm not sure. It's probably like one of the few niches I haven't worked with, and it's more of an affluent niche. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm mailing. They're higher end grabber mail pieces, and I'm mailing those and following up the following week with a phone call, doing it and hitting each little area in that niche. And the advantage, I think, and exactly what you're saying is a lot of people really aren't going to take those steps to do what you're doing, and that's really good for you because that's putting you aside of the competition, putting you in front. And I think if business owners would kind of listen to this, and I hope they kind of re-listen to this, they'll know those little extra steps, and it may seem like we said work in the beginning, is going to really set you apart, put you ahead, and definitely on the fast track.
Yeah, well, a couple of points on that. First of all, you don't have to do it yourself, or you don't have to do it yourself for too long.
All right.
You could pawn off, the letters being stuffed and whatever, either to a letter shop, and there are letter shops that do small runs.
Right.
You can have somebody in your office or somebody hired to do, a few hundred letters a month. I mean, that's not really a lot of work.
No.
But it's not really necessary for you to do it personally,
Right.
unless you want to.
Right.
So that's one thing to think about. The real work is in identifying the ideal client, which is your job anyway. I mean, right? You got to sell to the right people.
Right.
And then the second thing is determining what problems they're having, so that you can create a lead generation piece, which typically would be either a report that you send to them, or maybe a video that's online that you can send them to, something like that. And then creating the follow-up pieces. That's where the work is. But stuffing envelopes and that kind of thing, you don't really have to do.
No, you don't have to. No, like what I'm doing in my niches that I'm talking about, I'm mailing literally like 10 to 12 at a time and just hitting different sections because it's area exclusive. So once I pretty much get that target market or that person in that niche, I can move on to the next area, since it's area exclusive. But you're right. I mean, you can absolutely pawn off everything and literally just not even the copy. You can hire someone to do it for you too. I mean, literally, you can have everything done for you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And this process that I just explained, I know a realtor in Canada who works, what he does is he lists houses for sale, but he works primarily, and this might be a little bit off here. It's been a while since I spoke with him, but I believe he works primarily with expired listings. So if somebody has their house listed with realtor A,
Right.
the house doesn't sell, it expires, the listing expires, he then contacts those people. And what he does is, if I remember right, he told me at the time, he sent something like 200 to 300 letters to these expired listings as they were coming on, um, coming available.
Right.
He would send them like every month. He would be sending out 200 to 300 letters, and he had a very good business doing just that, sending the letters, and these were follow-up letters. So once he got them into his system, they would get a letter every single month, or it might even be every 2 weeks. I can't recall right now, but it was religiously done. And his secretary did, the stuffing,
Right.
but he wrote the letters that included great info, some sort of a lead gen magnet usually, and then they would follow up with calls. And he had a very good business just from that. I mean, I'm talking like a six-figure business just from sending out a few hundred letters every month.
Nice.
But again, he had the target market, which was an ideal market of
Right.
people who sell their house. Like, can't get any better than that.
Right.
And then he had a message that pertained to them, that was specific to them, he knew what their problems were. One of them being that the house didn't sell. And then he religiously followed up with them by mail and by phone until they were able to either establish a business relationship or move on.
Right. Nice. It's amazing how just even that, like you're saying, he only mailed out a couple hundred every month, and he's built a nice business for himself doing that. That's
It doesn't take much if you're selling a high-priced product or service.
right.
If you're you're selling something much cheaper, then you have to look into renting, mailing lists and that sort of thing.
Right. Do you do that, like, I guess, kind of shifting gears a little bit, but kind of on track here with obviously copy, because you're definitely known for your direct response copy and the results you get. Is that some of the research process you do, like when you're starting copy, the same thing where you look at the target market, kind of look at the overall picture?
Well, let's clarify one point. Direct response copywriting is nothing more than a sales message in print. And when I say print, that's not necessarily, on paper. It could be on a website or an email or a banner ad,
Right.
or an ad in a magazine. But it's nothing more than a sales message in print. So one of the things that I want to point out here is one of the reasons why business owners don't get more leads and more customers is they do not know how to structure a sales message. Plain and simple, they don't know how to sell.
Right.
It's hard to sell your product and services if you don't know how to sell. So I would suggest everybody to learn how to sell. It's really not that hard. And I'm not talking about pushy stuff and always be closing the last nonsense.
Right.
The basics of how to sell, and then in person, and you can take that and then put it on paper or put it on a website. Really not that difficult of a thing, but you do need to know the basics. So in terms of copywriting, which is again nothing more than a sales pitch, the same process is what I go through. Number one, I want to know who my target audience is, the ideal prospect.
Right.
Then I want to know what they're thinking. And when I say what they're thinking, what I'm talking about is what problems are they facing? Because, and this is an important part of human psychology, I don't know the exact percentages, but I am assuming, based on my own thoughts and talking to people in general, that at least 80% of our time is spent thinking about our problems.
Right.
Therefore, that's the starting point. Okay? So if you're selling cars, I guarantee you, your customers are thinking about what problems they face with the whole buying process in terms of, finding the right car, not getting ripped off by a salesperson, all those things. So
Right.
that's the first thing we do is we determine what problems does the market or the individual prospect, really is the way I look at it, what problems are they facing in relation to the product that I have and how it solves those problems. That's the first thing that we do.
Okay.
Once we get that down, then we understand what we need to talk about. Because in terms of getting a response, this is called direct response. In terms of getting a response, it's what you say that determines whether or not you get a response. It's not how you say it simply because you're not there in person to talk to people. So your body language, your tonality of your voice, and all that has nothing to do with it.
Right.
It's not going to influence them if it's a written material. It will influence them a little bit if it's a video, whether that video happens to be a PowerPoint or whether you're actually on video or stuff on screen talking.
Right.
But beyond that, it's what you say that's going to ultimately determine if they make a decision. And we base what we say on the problems that they're facing that our product or service may solve for them.
Okay. So let's say that the person did the research, they found the biggest problem in that market, and they think that's the problem. Do you recommend they just go out and use that in the headline right away, or do
Well,
you...
the first thing I recommend is making sure the product or service actually solves it.
That great point. Yeah, right.
If it doesn't solve it, or if it doesn't help to alleviate it in some way, then you need to focus on a different problem.
Right.
So that's the first thing, just making sure. Or what you can do is you can create a product or service, develop a product or service that does solve that biggest problem if you have the wherewithal to do it.
Right.
Okay? But if you don't, then you need to go to a different problem. So once you pinpoint the problem that your product does actually solve, or at least helps to alleviate that issue to some extent, then yes, we go ahead and we structure our entire pitch based upon solving that particular problem.
Okay. And so let's say I have the major problem, and do you recommend that they just go ahead and just get it out there and agitate that problem usually? Or, I mean, obviously it can depend on the niche and market, but just, do you recommend just getting it out there in the headline?
Well, yeah, you can get it out there in the headline. And by the way, I think we have a little issue here with our connection.
Yeah, I just saw that, and it's still recording here, so we're all good. But
Okay,
yeah,
good.
I did
So,
see that.
what I recommend is this: there are salesmanship is really a formulaic process. I learned that initially from Dan Kennedy, and then I came to see that it really is. It is a formula. It is a simple process, and you just fill in the blanks. You just have to know what to say at each step of the process.
Right.
So one way to make this easy is to consider the fact that there are certain sales formulas that work over and over again. One of them is the AIDA formula: attention, interest, desire, action.
Okay.
So in your headline, you got to get their attention. Now, you can get their attention with a positive statement, some sort of a promise. You can get their attention with a negative statement, talking about some problem that they're facing. You can also get their attention with some sort of a negative emotional reaction, like I'm trying to remember. There was a headline that I read by Clayton Makepeace, who's a tremendous copywriter,
Yeah.
and it was something like "dirty, rotten SOBs." And then it had some supporting copy in the superscript and the subscript that explained to you what those dirty, rotten, or who those dirty, rotten SOBs were. And it was a financial piece. It was talking, I think, about the stockbrokers and that kind of thing out there,
Right.
telling people the truth and so forth. But you got to get their attention somehow. You can also get their attention using what's called a grabber. And a grabber is, now this is going to work more so offline than online, but a grabber is something that is stuck to the top of a letter that somebody can grab off the letter.
Right.
Money usually is the best grabber.
Right.
But you can use anything. You use toothpicks, pencils, whatever, all sorts of stuff. So that's how you get their attention. The next thing you have to do is you have to build their interest. So usually the first 2-3 paragraphs and up to the first 500 words is where you catch somebody's interest. It's the same thing with if you're in person, right? The first thing you say, usually if you're selling in person, the first thing would be like a question. If that question gets their attention, what you say in the next 30 seconds or so is how you build up their interest so that they stay focused on you.
Right.
And then after that, you're building their desire for that particular product or service. And usually that's based around story copy, reason why copy, and bullets.
Right.
And then finally, you ask them for the action you want, because again, in direct response, we're not trying to build an image, we're not trying to brand, we're trying to get an immediate response of some sort.
Right.
That's the process. Now, another formula that works extremely well is a formula that Gary Halbert, who was considered the best copywriter, maybe in the last 50 years or so, or longer.
Right.
And his formula is problem, promise, proof, proposition. What that means is first you lay out the problem. You then make them a promise. Obviously, that problem will be solved, whatever you have to offer. You then give them proof that your promise actually can solve the problem.
Right.
And then you give them a proposition that would be silly for them not to take you up on.
Right. And I was actually just thinking of Gary Halbert, when you were talking about the other ad with Clayton Makepeace. I think he wrote an ad called Lies, 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 and it was a financial piece like that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And in writing that piece, again, the headline was supported, though, with, Lies, Lies, Lies was supported with superscript copy, subscript copy, and also, pictures and stuff like that, kind of, which in direct response you don't really have to use pictures, but for that particular piece, he did use it, and it worked extremely well, where, he showed stockbrokers lying to people, he showed, the government upping taxes,
Right.
that. So all of that was kind of supporting it, but, so it worked together, but that's another way to get attention is to kind of tie all that in. But it has to be real quick. You don't have much time to get their attention because we're bombarded by a lot of different advertising. We basically tune almost everything out.
Right.
And that's another reason why it's so important to talk about what's really on people's minds. what's really on people's minds is their problems. That's why Gary Halbert starts with a problem.
Right.
That's what's on their mind, and that above anything else is probably what's going to get their attention.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If you can show people that, and plus, it's really building rapport because you're showing people you understand their problem and you're offering the solution, which is obviously your product or service, if it does that. So that's nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, once you understand how, we don't have to call it salesmanship. We call it influence or persuasion. Once you understand how people are persuaded, it becomes very obvious that they have to be persuaded through a formulaic process. I mean, it doesn't happen haphazardly.
Right.
And so this whole process of having problem, promise, proof, proposition, that is a really nice structure. And it follows along with the AIDA formula. When you present them with a problem, you are getting their attention.
Right, the good old AIDA.
You're building their interest. The proof also does that as well. It builds that interest and desire.
Right.
And then you have a proposition, which is your call to action to do whatever it is you want to do.
Nice. And obviously one way throughout the copy, like you were talking about too, to get their interest is the bullets, the bullets part of the sales letter. And I think Ben Settle and I were discussing this on episode 1 here, where we were talking about Gary Halbert's old bullet with the Entrepreneur magazine with I think it was something like legal cocaine, and how years after the product was advertised, people were still calling just to try to get the answer of the product for that one bullet.
Yeah, right. It was I think it was fake cocaine.
Yeah, fake cocaine or fake legal cocaine or something.
Which is really odd that you're curious about that, considering it had nothing to do with the product.
Yeah, right. It had nothing to even do with the product, and that's I guess the power of bullets. Do you have maybe a style, or is there certain bullets or ways that you like to come up with bullets to kind of influence and get the copy to really pop?
Well, there's a number of ways to write. There's the typical way of writing bullets, which is you start out with how to, a number, the word the, a, and those kinds of things.
Right.
That's the typical way to write bullets, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to get more creative, I would say look at bottom line. Anything that they put out is usually bullet intensive.
Right.
And they don't just use that formula. They use other formulas too to get your attention with bullets, or rather to keep your interest and build your desire with bullets. But any letter by John Carlton that's bullet intensive, those are definitely worth reading over.
Right.
Because he's amazingly good at writing bullets. My style is typically his style, which is, and obviously I model him, which is you have one point of interest and then another one or two lines that expand on that. He calls that the 1-2 punch.
Right.
And that works extremely well.
Are you referring to where you would say like this is the fact, but it's not what you think, kind of thing, or
That's
back?
part of it. You can even expand upon it even more.
Right.
To make it more enticing, because the whole point of the bullets is to really build, keep interest. That's actually the secondary point. The
Right.
real point is to build desire for the product.
Right.
So usually the copy would start out with something like right before the bullet. When you read this book, you're going to discover, and then you start having the bullets. So those all build desire for the book.
Right. And they've talked about before, like a lot of copywriters have given that tip to kind of add a little punch to your bullet, at the end, put the page number, like find this tip on page, 165, or find this,
Yeah, I mean, those are all great ways to increase, somebody's desire and to tie the bullet in back to the product. Again, build the desire for the product.
Right.
However, I also want to say this: you can write a very good letter or ad without having any bullets whatsoever. And some ads, you really don't want to have bullets in them. Let me give you an explanation of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
For most business people, okay, in my opinion, if you go back to the lead generation stuff, you're not going to write an ad that has bullets. You're going to write an ad that looks, if it's going to be an ad, talked about a letter before, a lead generation letter.
Right.
Let's say you want to write an ad and put it in a newspaper or put it online. You want to write something that reads like an advertorial,
Right.
like newspaper article. And typically you don't have bullet points in those.
Right. It's going to kind of throw the feel of it if you add the bullets.
Yeah, it may in fact do that, and also you want to make advertorials look like either content in a publication that you're putting your ad in.
Right.
It's an ad, but it doesn't look like an ad. It's an ad that looks like an article.
Right.
And you can do that online too if you want to. So the reason you want to do that is because people will read. First of all, people read headlines like 5 times more than they read anything else.
Right.
In publication, but they will read articles, stuff that doesn't look like obvious advertising, about 5 to 10 times more than they would read ads.
Right.
So that's the reason why you want to make an advertorial look like an article. The only difference is at the end you're going to have, like, I just did a tear sheet for a client that sells to dentists.
Okay.
Well, the tear sheet is going to be put on newspaper stock, I believe. It's going to look like it was torn out of a newspaper.
Nice.
Okay? And it's going to be mailed. But it's going to have like a little yellow sticky note that says, Joe, you should read this, it's really interesting, and then, the initial of whoever's sending it.
Right.
But it's going to look like it was torn out of a newspaper.
Right.
That kind of an ad, it's an ad, but it doesn't read like an ad. It reads like content that you would find in a publication directed towards dentists. And then it has a call to action. Like in the last, it's a 3-column ad, and in the last column, I think about halfway through, is when we actually tell them about a free report that you get or a free package that you get.
Nice. Yeah,
That's all about the problems that dentists are facing in the current economy.
that's nice.
There's no bullets whatsoever. We are not, we're not really pushing the lead generation magnet,
Right.
but we are.
Right. You're positioning as that person's coming off as the authority, and then by the way, I have this to kind of help you out with.
Exactly. Now, we
Nice.
could do it the other way. We could have done it where it was more of a blatant ad, and it would say something like, free whatever, free report or whatever is going to show you how to increase your dental practice and this and that.
Right.
And then we could have written bullets for that.
Right.
However, we chose to do it this way because we wanted to look more like, we wanted to disguise it, basically,
Absolutely.
to have the feel of a newspaper article.
Nice. Nice. And I know you got a lot of things going on today, so we'll definitely have to talk about getting together, in the future to maybe, do some more shows here. But I did want to ask you before we left, because, obviously, overall, like you said perfectly, the copy is really direct response. Copy is salesmanship in print. But I think a lot of people, even copywriters, business owners, a lot of people struggle with kind of like that big idea or coming up, like you said, maybe the big problem or the big concept of it. Do you have maybe steps, strategies, maybe even a tip you can give the audience on maybe kind of positioning themselves as different, coming up with that big idea for their next, say they're going to sit down and write copy to sell a product or service, the next widget?
Yeah, well, on that note, it depends how competitive your market is. Like, I write some financial copy,
Right.
financial advisories and newsletters. That is an extremely competitive market. The best copywriters in the world write in that market.
Right.
So for that market, you've got to do a lot of skull work to come up with some sort of a unique, big idea because, very smart people are already on that job for other companies.
Right, some big guys, yeah.
And so it's a very daunting task to come up with a big idea when you're in that kind of a competitive market. Most business owners are a market that don't use direct response. So almost anything you do, like when we're selling real estate,
Right.
we would come up with, again, we would sit down and we would think through what are the problems, let's say, that a home seller would have. And we make a list of 10, 15, 20 things. And so one of them could be, what if your home inspection goes wrong? Okay, so that would be a big idea.
Right.
And so the big idea would be basically you could lose the sale of your home if the home inspection goes wrong, and we would write up a report about what to do to make sure your home inspection goes okay.
That's a great tip. So, I mean, basically, you're saying that basically write down the problems that that market would face, and then pick, the big problem from that and tailor that message, just focusing on that problem. Then.
Exactly.
Nice.
Absolutely. And then you can test different big ideas when you do something like that.
Right.
See which ones are pulling better, and then those are the ones that you run most consistently.
Nice, and that can apply, I guess, towards your copy too. Overall, try the big problem on it, or
Well, in terms of the big idea, that's one way to do it.
right,
Another way to do it, and this is the skull work way to do it, is you have to read a lot of research. Again, if the general audience listening to this are business owners, I doubt that many of them are going to take the time to do all the research necessary to discover all the big ideas that could really revolutionize their advertising.
right,
But if anybody is crazy enough to do it, what you need to do is you need to read as much as you can about the people that are buying your products.
right,
So basically, any articles written by anybody about your business and how it relates to your marketplace. So if you sell real estate, well, what articles are out there by legitimate media outlets, for instance, that talk about what's going on in the real estate market? You got to read all those.
right,
Locally, because real estate is basically a local industry. Locally, what's going on in the market? You got to read about what's going on with financing programs in the market. What's going on with your particular market in terms of houses selling or not selling. You got to look at all that, and from all that, you will find gems. And you got to nobody else because they're not going to do the research, or even if they run across them, they're not going to know what to look for. But basically, the big idea is a concept that just sort of slaps you across the face when you read it. It just really stands out, and it's something that nobody else in your market is really doing it or advertising in any way, shape, or form.
yeah. That's awesome. That's a great point. I'll give everybody out there, and I'm not sure even if you know about this site. This is a site I kind of stumbled on, but if you kind of want to cut the learning curve out there on some of the research or things that people have done, there's a great site out there called statisticbrain.com. Have you ever checked that one out, or?
No, I haven't.
It's called, yeah, you should statisticbrain.com. Definitely check it out. I kind of stumbled onto that a while back. And what it is it takes all the information from each different sector. Like if there's an article in Forbes, it'll pull the statistics from there and give you, like demographics, education, things going on in that industry. And there's a lot of stuff in there that you can just gather. Research surveys, I was reading one on financial. They interviewed women about going into financial planners and their thoughts on that, which could be huge if you're writing copy, for that market.
That's an excellent tip. In fact, let me share a quick story with you.
Yeah.
I find very, very interesting before we wrap this up.
Uh,
There was a guy, I forget his name off the top of my head right now, but when he was 17, and this is back in the 70s, he started selling pot.
okay.
And that's what that was his job. He was going to school and he was selling pot. He was making a lot of money.
Right.
He decided, gee, this is pretty cool. I bet you I can make a career out of this. So what he did is he decided to move his operation from Florida to San Francisco. And this, by the way, is a true story. Now, he was smarter than the average dope dealer because what he did was he hired a research firm and he asked them to find out where the majority of the drug busts had occurred in the past 5 or 10 years
Right.
in the San Francisco Bay Area where he was planning on going.
Right.
He found was that almost all of the drug busts happened in areas where the drug dealers did not control the property.
Right.
So, in other words, somebody would have a boatload of weed, and they would try to, unload it at off, somewhere where they didn't control that particular property.
Right.
And next, they're getting busted. So what this guy did, and he was pretty rich at the time, is he bought a pier, in San Francisco Bay. He literally bought a pier.
Right.
And then he had a bunch of boats that he owned. He owned basically a flotilla of boats. And what they did is they went down to Mexico or wherever the hell they went, got the weed, brought it over. This guy had a $50 million a year business before he got busted. But my point isn't about, drugs and all that. My point is that he was able to get the right research to let him know what to do to avoid getting busted. And he didn't get busted, by the way, because somebody ratted on him or because somebody found out what he was doing at his pier. He got busted because he left his notebook at a dentist.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I saw that story. Yeah.
That had all the details about his business, and somebody handed it to the cops.
Yeah, all that research, all that work, and he dropped it on that one little, leaving it at the table that one day.
Yeah, that was his mistake. But the point is because he did that research up front,
Right.
he was able to avoid getting busted and to build a $50 million a year business. Granted, it was illegitimate on the research. So the point is if you do your research, you will find out what nobody else knows, and you can avoid the problems that everybody else is going to have, and you'll have that advantage.
Right, and I guess going back to that example, no one else in his industry even thought of it or even took the time to do it, and he did. Yeah, and that's what he was at. And even I think I remember seeing the interview. They even said he could have done so many better things, if he would have used his mind to not evil, but whatever. But yeah, still.
Yeah, but now, interestingly enough, that a couple of states are legalizing this. Now he has a company that's actually selling stock in hemp products.
Ah, he's back in the game. I didn't see that. Nice.
Yeah, he's out of jail now. He's going back to that. So my point to all of this is that if you bother to take time to do the research,
Right.
And he just hired somebody to do it.
Right.
So if you do have, and I don't know what it cost him back then, I'm sure it was a few grand. You don't have to do that kind of intensive research, but you can hire somebody, maybe a college kid who is, studying information technology or something like that,
Right.
something having to do with research, and you can go ahead for a few $100, find out information that nobody else or very few people in your market know,
Right.
and also, even if they know it, a lot of them won't know what to do with it.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And definitely I want to thank you for coming on. I know you have a lot of things going on here, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And can you tell the listeners out there, maybe before we go, most importantly, I hope they take action on everything we talked about, but is there a way maybe they can find out more about you, or?
Sure, if they're interested, they can contact me at my website. I've got a couple of them. One is JohnAngelCopywriting.com.
Okay.
And then the other one is my name, John Anghelache, spelled ANGHELACHE.com. Or they can shoot me an email at copybum, COPYBUM, at yahoo.com.
Nice. And again, I want to thank you for coming on, and hopefully I can have you on in the future. Maybe we can dive into a little more on the copywriting and stuff. So.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. And everybody listening, most importantly, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the show, but definitely take action out there on everything John and I spoke about. And definitely, if you all can do me just 2 quick favors out there, just simply hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the future business boosting podcasts. And if you stuck around this far with John and I, you obviously enjoyed the show and saw the value. Make sure you leave those reviews and comments. Just need help getting the show noticed here. And when you're done, go ahead and head over to John's sites he mentioned, and go ahead and head over to FastEasySuccess.com. Go ahead and grab your business cheat sheets waiting for you. I'm your host, Eric Barton, the Results Specialist, signing out today. And we'll see you next week for another Fast Easy Success Marketing Insider. And here's to your success.